All right, I think we're live. Hello, everyone. It's Megan Seaton again with Avero Advisors. I lead up our business development team. And today I have a very special guest with me. He is the Director of Advisory Services. His name is Mr. Robert Kornovich. I like to call him RK, and some people like to call him DJ Bobby K because he has the perfect
Bobby
radio
K is a
voice.
nickname I picked up from a client, which is good. I'll take that.
So, if you guys are joining us today, please feel free to post in the comments and let us know that you're here. We'd love to know where you're joining from and what kind of weather you guys are having. I feel like it's different across the whole United States today. We're about 70 degrees here in East Tennessee. Feels like summer.
That
So
might be a touchy subject for some people.
it might be. It might be. Yeah.
It's actually cold here in Arizona.
Is
But
it?
yeah, I'm
Oh
not
my
gonna.
gosh.
This is a
Yes.
time of year where it gets dangerous for me to brag about my weather, good or bad.
Yeah, right. Right. All right. So today, I know you guys have seen the topic, but we're talking about post implementation strategies and this idea of managed services after your ERP has been implemented. So, super excited to talk about this. But again, if you're joining us, please post a comment in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. And feel free to ask questions. We're an open book. We love to give free advice. So, all right, RK, I'm going to let you have the floor for just a minute and introduce yourself. Tell our listeners or viewers where are we or how you got into Avero Advisors and the space that you're in.
So my background is local government. I did local and state government for about 20 years before coming to Avero about 3.5 years ago. And so the fact that we service local government, pseudo government, state government clients, housing authorities, public sector entities is really what attracted me, as well as the CEO who I actually hired AV many years ago to do an IT strategic plan for me. And thankfully he did a good job. And thankfully he was impressed with me because here I am. So the fact that we can continue this and I continue leveraging all the experience that I had in public sector of, really focusing everything we do on the mission of your organization to deliver its services to the public. And that can vary. Some people think that, local gov is local gov. And no, local government comes in a variety of flavors. Some of it's financial. If you're lucky to be in a community that's well blessed with good finances and good revenue structures, there's a lot you can do. There are a lot of communities that are already at a disadvantage from the get-go, so that's always something that has to be struggled with, especially if it's a financial. So local government has a variety of flavors, and then you lay on top of that your elected officials, your mayors, your council members, your board members. They have an idea of how they want the community to be run and what the community should do. And at the end of the day, it's going to work best if everything you do as an organization and everything we provide to you is driven towards getting to those goals that your citizens want, that your elected officials want. And so that's the sort of secret sauce people will say about Avero is that we understand that high level leadership concept and visioning, but we can get the project done to its most minute details. So that's the story on me.
Yes, absolutely. Very well said, by the way.
Thank you.
I know I might have misled you with my question. We had some people pop up in the chat and I was like, oh, who's joining us? So we have Mark M and Kyler. Hi, Kyler. And it looks like Mark is experiencing summer-like weather. And then Kyler says it's cold in Colorado. I can only imagine. So let's talk about our topic today. So post-implementation strategy. So what are some common challenges that organizations may face after implementation?
So there's two things that we always have to be mindful in ERP implementations. One, it's very easy to go backwards on some of the things that you did during your ERP selection and implementation to improve things. Workarounds are going to pop up again. And you have to make sure that there's structure in place to address changes to a workflow that the software can handle rather than just going back to one of the problems a lot of people have with their ERP system is, why am I still doing everything in Excel? And when is this system actually going to do what I want to do? So there's a myriad reasons why you can regress backwards on that. Two, all the momentum that you built up during the ERP implementation can fade pretty quickly. And that's understandable. You reach go live, post implementation, things go well. There's already a level of fatigue of, I put a lot into this project. I asked a lot of my workforce. We really worked hard to get this done. And to be honest, there's also this feeling of, I spent a lot of money on this ERP product. The damn thing should just work fine. I shouldn't have to nurture it. I shouldn't have to care for it. And there's also this belief that moving to SaaS, software as a service, in other words, hosting, just obligates you to be able to take your hand off the wheel and just let the vendor take care of everything. And that simply doesn't work out. So what managed services looks to tackle is all the good things that you did and all the momentum you built during your ERP implementation. Carry that forward so you don't go into this boom bust cycle that most people do, which is product works great for a while, and there's a period of time where new employees aren't trained, or they're trained on materials that are no longer relevant. You don't keep up with the newest versions of it. You don't keep on top of system changes that you've requested. You don't keep on top of the configuration and the policy and user management. And what happens is, after 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you're back at a spot where you don't like your ERP system because you haven't really nurtured it and taken care of it. So, and this is something that actually clients approached us about several years ago, that we started doing this sort of managed ERP services. And we really should advertise it more, because it's key to the long-term success with a lot of organizations that just don't have the resources to replace all the value add that we put into the project, or that someone else put into the project for you.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So how can these managed services actually help maximize the investment of an ERP system?
I think the most important thing is the vendor relationship. It's the easiest one to jettison, and it's the easiest one to ignore. And your software vendor has an incentive to do that, right? They're charging you an annual maintenance agreement fee. The less resources they can put into making you happy and keeping you happy, that's what they're going to do, because the software vendors are just as understaffed as a lot of other people. So vendor management is usually the first thing that evaporates in maintaining your relationship with the vendor. And that's key, because if there's system changes or system problems, or a new direction that you want to go and implement a new module that you decided not to do during the initial implementation, but now you're seriously looking at it, someone has to manage that relationship. I can't expect someone who's already a director or a manager or even just a supervisor in a department to suddenly have to absorb the entire client relationship and do all the building of that relationship just to get a couple of questions answered. So where this goes is, no one talks to the vendor on a regular basis, interfaces with the vendor. Sometimes it'll just default going to someone who actually has nothing to do with it, but they got the raw deal on that. And the vendor relationship is the biggest key. It's what we do best as well. For those of you who've been through our presentations on this, building that vendor relationship and holding them accountable. You signed a contract with them.
Right.
You need to get everything out of that contract. Vendor relationship is the most important thing. It's the one that's easily forgotten.
Yep, absolutely. What are some key considerations when choosing to outsource something like managed services after implementation?
So there's a number of ways you can leverage it. The good news is all of this can be changed on the fly. I mean, there's a lot of services such as help desk triaging. That's another one we've been asked to do, which is, rather than having your IT team, which is, they're great technically, but they're not end users on the ERP product. They're not really going to be able to field questions and be able to determine, oh, this is a functionality issue in this software, I know how to solve this, or no, this is a technical issue that needs to go to the software vendor. Or is this just an IT issue? Is this just a basic hardware issue that needs to be addressed? So we get asked to come in and do help desk on that and run the front end help desk for their ERP product. And we bring in expertise in the system. We also bring in technical information technology expertise, but also an understanding of your policies and procedures and be able to instantly triage a ticket, send it to the person that needs to go to the software vendor, IT, or if it's a functional question, we can answer it, or we will refer you to the proper person in your organization who can give you that particular answer. That's the most exciting one because that's the biggest impact on your end users. They feel like they're taken care of. They're going to have a better attitude about the software. It's going to unburden you from having to have someone that's an expert in all things. So in these types of managed services, we can be an extension of IT. We can be an extension of your compliance department. We can be an extension of your finance department. And all this is changeable on the fly. And I put all of it under always on project management services. We are always there to help project manage this entire thing, no matter what comes up with ERP. And the help desk is the easiest way to impact the users directly. And the presence of the project management reassures all your leadership that, hey, this is going to be successful for another year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and keep that ERP system going and really leverage that investment. You pay a lot of money for the system. Get the most out of it that you can.
Yes, absolutely. So let me ask you this. How does post-implementation support from the vendor differ from this idea of managed services, outsourcing these managed services?
So it's going to be different for every vendor. What we bring in is our expertise of being able to, and a lot of times you're going to be working for these MSP managed services.
Right.
You're going to be working with the exact same people that are doing project or ERP implementations on a regular basis. So we can bring in our own expertise and system understanding to be able to give you that post go live triage and support, because there are some software companies that, I'm sorry to say, but post go live, they evaporate. That's when they transition you off of your implementation team support to what they call regular support. And in some cases, that literally puts you in a queue with 1,000 other customers. And then you have to fight for priority on things. So that's an extreme case where you're not getting anything from the software vendor. You're going to know about that in advance. So this tends to be more towards people who bought a product that they got stuck with that bad support, not you implemented a new ERP system and then support evaporated the day after. So rare extreme circumstance, but it can happen, especially if you're struggling with your existing ERP system and you just want to leverage some regular managed services.
Right, right. And we love our software vendor friends. So no harm there. We love you guys. We just understand that sometimes you may or may not have the time to, provide that support that is needed in some of these bigger and larger ERP implementation projects. So sort of a big question around ERP as a whole. We always are asked, on premise versus cloud, right? And how does that in particular affect post implementation strategies?
So this question becomes easier and easier as the months go on, because we're rapidly approaching most software vendors, if not all, are going to discontinue an on-prem offering. So it tends to be with legacy implementations or some software vendors that are they still haven't leveraged their products in the cloud, and they're still using, software coding from 15, 20, 25 years ago, platforms along those lines. So those are a very rare exception. SaaS is software as a service, is great for your IT department. It lowers their overhead. It lowers the amount of time that they have to stay involved. It makes integrations and interfaces a lot easier. You shift the burden of updating things and a lot of the technical update back to the vendor, who is in theory the expert in the product. So when it comes time to evaluate a new release in your test environment and everything looks good, usually you press a button or make a phone call, and over the weekend, your software vendor is going to go into your SaaS environment and upgrade you to the latest and greatest. So you don't have to have IT's particular involvement. Everything else kind of stays the same. I mean, accessibility is a lot easier because it's hosted, but someone still has to manage putting in a new user if they get promoted, changing their security rights so that the system reflects what their new job title is and what they do. Someone still has to review the release notes. and
Mm-hmm.
determine, is this something we want to test, or can we skip this upgrade and not put our staff through a testing procedure? Someone has to coordinate the testing of that. Someone has to coordinate the management of a testing script so that everything is completely tested. There's a lot of things. Training is another one that comes out of this as
Yep.
well. There's a lot of things that SaaS just doesn't solve. It makes it easier, and it takes the burden off of your IT department, but someone still has to manage policy changes in the system. And a lot of these systems now, their benefit of customization, even though customization is a bad word, comes in their settings, so that you can set the product up through a number of settings to do exactly what you want it to do, and especially in configuring a workflow. And those are not set it and forget it. Those have to be evaluated as a new version comes out, as what you do changes. That needs constant care and someone managing it going forward. Or, like I said, you wind up going back to this boom bust cycle.
Right. Absolutely. Kyler says another great tip when vetting vendors is to ask what post go live support will you provide. Can you speak a little bit to Kyler's comment?
Yeah, I think if you're in the middle of an ERP implementation, or you're about to select a product, or even if you're sooner in the stage than that, reach out to other customers and find out what that post go live support looks like. That's the key, and I think that's the one thing. Let's just assume a particular software vendor is being nefarious, and that they're just going to lead you along and say, yeah, your support's going to be great. The implementation team is going to be who's going to support you going forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's the end users that you talk to in other organizations are going to give you the straightforward answer. And if the post go live support is bad, they're going to tell you.
Yep.
So do your homework on things like that, and get the information that you need, because guess what? Your staff is wondering the same question too. They want to know,
Right.
go live day is going to be crazy enough. I just need to know that someone's going to be there to answer a question, no matter how much training I got, and just give them the positive assurance that go live and post go live is going to go just fine.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. And AV's joining us from Goa, India. Hey, AV. Kyler says it's a late night for you, and it is, but thank you for joining us. Thank you. Thank you. So we do have a question in the comments. What do service level agreements, what role do they play in post implementation strategies and managed services?
Very key ones. And actually, this is both externally for your relationship with your software vendor, or even with us as a managed services vendor for ERP. But this is also something that's very important internally, especially with your IT department. The service level agreements are the best way to get everyone on the same page as to what support is going to look like for this particular product, and define all these questions that everyone's wondering, but either they don't want to answer, they don't want to ask. But by doing service level agreements with the software vendor externally and everyone else who's involved, and hopefully your IT department has those already, there's a clear path and understanding as to what is my involvement in taking care of this product. So if you're pushing tier one or level one help desk support for this product off to IT, that should be defined somewhere. If you're having us triage everything, that should be defined somewhere. Because at the end of the day, everyone's going to make an assumption, or they're going to guess, and this is going to be taken care of. And that, especially with the vendor relationship, that falls apart very quickly, becomes a blame game, and then gets you back into this situation again. I want everyone to avoid. Don't let your vendor relationship sour on you, and
Right.
don't get back into that boom bust cycle. So SLAs is the best way. Just like when we say during procurement, your organization putting together an RFP and definitions requirement before you go out and find a software vendor is the best way to get everyone in the room on the same page as to what we're looking for and what we're looking to do. So that's an outstanding question.
Yes, absolutely. Another question from the chat. How important is user adoption to the success of an ERP implementation? And what strategies can organizations use to encourage it? I love this question. I love it.
Yeah, there's a variety of ways of doing this. It usually gets limited by resources. There's a variety of approaches that can be done that best fit your organization's availability. So when we start getting users involved on things, the first thing that happens is their supervisor, manager, department director goes, whoa, this person's got a full-time job. They can't be in your focus group. They can't work on testing new releases. They can't go to the user conference. That's very prevalent, very common. It's also understandable too, because as we tell people when we are working with them on an implementation, we recognize you have a day job, and this is yet another thing on top of what you're already doing. So
absolutely,
what you have to do from early on is get leadership sold on the idea that this is an investment that's going to keep you out of trouble in the long run and keep you from being in the same position again 4 or 5 years later. So finding a balance between, yes, we need your users and some of your managers to test new functionality to determine, do we want to implement this release or do we want to wait? If you show that, one, we're not wasting their time, I think that's the key thing. Always show that this is useful, it's relevant, and it's going to deliver something for them. If nothing else, peace of mind. But don't waste their time with stuff that is frivolous. That's a key thing that we focus on as project managers. So showing them we're not going to waste their time, and then showing them that there's a benefit to this, and how this actually saves them a lot of hassle in the long run, rather than just upgrading to the latest and greatest system, but no one bothered to look at the release notes and see that a key workflow changed, and now the department's in turmoil, or there's a problem with delivery of services to citizens. It's the best way to avoid that. And what we like to do is we don't want you to have to go through that pain. So we're leveraging our experience in, not causing disruption in your organization, and showing what a bad product release that wasn't tested can do to the morale of your organization when it comes to ERP. Let us show you how to avoid all those things so that this becomes a great product that serves you for 5, 6, 8, 10, 15 years.
Yeah, absolutely. I did add AV to the stream, but I guess he didn't want to chat with us today. So sorry, not to not to be awkward with all of you all, but he popped on and I was like, oh, maybe he has something to say, but he popped right back off. But let's see, any more questions? We do have, what are some best practices for managing data security and privacy in an ERP system through the managed services piece?
Oh, excellent. And this is a point I was thinking of earlier, and I'm glad that came up. So because of our background as a technology firm, and also the resources that we have on our own team, cybersecurity is the other key aspect of this. One, being able to just manage your cybersecurity and your best practices in general. Again, going back to end user security. If a user leaves the organization, or their role changes, or say they get demoted or moved to another department, it's important to go into the system and realign the security that's appropriate for their new role, especially if they're terminated. You need to turn off that account, because
absolutely
the downside of SaaS is now this person could be able to access this system from their home computer. And you just don't want, you want to be able to control that. So that's the foundation of cybersecurity. The second thing is, again, this is always on project management services. We deal with a variety of vendors on a daily basis, a variety of different type of projects and products in a variety of environments. We're going to be able to give you the best eye on how to keep cybersecurity the forefront of your ERP system. And we also offer that in our technical side of the house that does direct managed services on IT infrastructure. But that can be carried forward into end user aspects as well. Let us leverage our expertise and experience in helping maintain that for you, because no matter how informed you try and stay on cybersecurity, it's a fact that also comes from my background in local government. It becomes very easy to become siloed because of everything that you're doing. And one of the first things you're gonna let go is staying on top of weekly cybersecurity briefings. You should do it. I can't blame you for not doing it, though. I understand how busy that environment is. Let the experts who are here to provide those services help you with that.
Yes, absolutely. So AV posted a great question in the chat. What is the difference between ERP managed services and just managed IT services?
So ERP services are directly related to the end user experience of your product. And again, managing users' accounts in the background, policy settings, configurations. These are all things that are end user facing. They affect the end user. So that doesn't mean that the IT managed services portion of it doesn't affect the end user, but that tends to be focused more towards on just maintaining the systems that deliver what you need to the device in front of you, or to your system in general. So similar in the concepts of there's some background work that also directly benefits the end user, but the managed services part of it spends most of its time dealing with the end user, the leadership, the workflow owners, the vendors, and the customer service relationship with them, and provides that environment where your end users can constantly be able to use the system and get a question answered if they are having a problem with the system, or they need something changed.
Yep. Kyler says, I also feel like the term managed services is misunderstood just to include IT initiatives, but culture aspects, OCM aspects are often more important. So
yeah, if there's a better name for this, I would love to hear it, honestly. So if anyone has any suggestions, but it really was based upon the IT managed services model, and then how do we configure this directly for ERP? Because we started doing this when I started 3.5 years ago. We already were doing this on a client. We have another client we're doing it for right now, and then we have a major client they're asking us to stay around for as long as we want to and just provide the ongoing project managed services and services we're providing in implementation. So would
yes,
love a different name if
yes,
it fits better, but that's the best way I can describe it.
sure. So speaking of client, Kyler also wants to know if we could share a quick case study of maybe start to finish, how we were selected as a trusted advisor through an ERP project, and then how we ended up staying on the back end of that for this sort of idea of managed ERP services.
Yeah, so there's a number of good examples. I think the one that's going to be the clearest to explain in a brief amount of time is we were brought in to take a look at an existing product that a lot of people were unhappy with. And the organization was at a crossroads. They were either going to figure out how to re-leverage what they have and all the money they put into the system, which they'd only had it for a fairly short period of time. So we were able to come in, establish a relationship of leading the internal user groups that manage all that. And then after a while, to help manage the vendor relationship, which is probably the biggest thing that was strained. The client and the software vendor weren't talking. Meanwhile, the client's paying $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 a year to a software vendor who's not providing any help desk services for the product, and is certainly not maintaining a relationship with the client. So the first thing we did was get involved in figuring out where things were in terms of the product itself and how it's being used, and also with the relationship with the vendor. And that includes also talking to the vendor and finding out, where are you guys going with this product? Are you going to be able to re-leverage it in a hosted environment? What's the long-term goals of what you're looking to do with the product? And along with that, after a number of months, came managing the help desk for the product, because in order for me to manage the vendor relationship and hold the vendor accountable, I have to know what the problems the organization is having, so then I can use that to work with the software vendor to get the vendor relationship improved. And the best way to do that was just run the help desk for that entire product. And again, we had the expertise to determine, is this just a policy thing? Is this something specific to this organization that's in a user manual that I can just reference to this user? Is this a workstation issue, in which case I'm going to send it to IT and get IT involved to fix? Or is this truly a functionality issue that's with the product, and I either need to put a help desk ticket into, or trouble request into, the software vendor, or ask for this to be a future enhancement? And that relationship continued on, because at the end of the day, they were saving significant staff time and seeing drastic improvements in the way the end user was looking at the system. That, along with the other things that I talked about, managing testing of environments, managing the training, managing the all the interfaces that are tied to this particular product, which by the way are also changing at the same time too. They're advancing, and they needed someone to turn to who could explain to them, how is this going to work and integrate into the existing system. We provided that expertise, and then got the vendor relationship back on track, got the end users bought into the success of this product, and being able to get many more years out of it before deciding, do I really need to switch to something else, or are we in a good spot now? So in terms of what it's saved them, no exaggeration, millions of dollars, because once you go down the road of implementing ERP in a large organization, it gets very expensive very quickly. Oh, yeah. And there's also the turmoil that you're going to cause end users by upending the product that they're using and bringing in a new product. So we save the customer from having to automatically start the process of looking for a new product. And as a short aside, what happens when you do that is the first thing you do is you go back to abandoning your existing vendor relationship. So the year it takes for your end users to go live on the new system, they're suffering even more from lack of support. And people stop doing upgrades on the old system. They'll stop managing all the key points that I made earlier. So being able to get in there and take a look at what you have before you take the drastic but sometimes very important step of replacing your ERP saves you money in the long run. Most importantly, it saves credibility with your staff, and it saves you from pulling your hair out. I mean, these are not super easy, simple things to do. So let's make sure it's being done right for the right reasons and in the right way.
Right. And also that you have somebody to turn to when you need to, jump off a ledge. Right. Yeah. I think relationship building is a big part of what we do, and I stand behind that 100%. Sometimes you just need to be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody and know that it's going to be okay. Right.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So last question real quick before we jump off. How often should organizations review their post-implementation strategies and managed services to ensure that they remain aligned with their changing business needs?
So it depends. If you're talking about things that you don't already have, you're going to have to review that on a fairly regular basis. If it's a situation where you've involved us, that relationship is constant and ongoing. There can be formal checkpoints on a monthly basis, but really, if we're doing our job correctly as a managed service provider for your ERP, the relationship is continuous. Anytime you have a question, concern, comment, you should feel free enough to pick up the phone and give me a call or send me an email and get the concern or the matter taken care of. So post live can be tricky. That's usually going to be covered by, if we're project managing your implementation, we're going to take care of you post live anyway. And the software vendor should be doing the same thing as well. So it's in that gray area of post go live is where things start to get fuzzy, and where a lot of people sort of take their hands off the wheel and go, okay, that's project's done. I can move on to something else. So in theory, it's the same thing with your software vendor as well. You should never be waiting a month to have a check-in with your software vendor. You should have a continuing relationship with them so that you can rely upon them. Because again, you're paying a lot of money through that contract. You really should get quality service.
Absolutely. Well, RK, thank you so much for joining me today and doing a live. I'm sure our viewers enjoyed it. This was a great topic. I loved it. It was great.
Thank you.
Greetings in India. He also said that MERPs should be managed ERP services. So that's the name he came up with.
He's the boss. He can call it what he wants.
He can call it whatever he wants. I will not disagree with him. Well, thank you guys. RK, do you have any last words? Anything else you want to say?
Just for those of you who are in whatever various stage of ERP implementation, I mean, think about how useful, and it doesn't have to be, I'm not here to do a sales pitch per se and tell you got to go with us to do this, but really put some thought into how are you going to manage this post go live, and how are you going to keep the momentum going forward, and how are you going to keep your staff enthused. And that can be a struggle, but it has to be considered, because it's a reality, and in some cases, it's going to put you right back in the spot you're trying to avoid in the first place.
Yeah, Absolutely. Yes, that was a drill. If you heard the background noise, we are currently remodeling our East Tennessee office. So if you guys heard any background noise today, that's what it was. But thank you anyway for joining us. And you'll catch us next Wednesday. Bye, guys. Have a great week.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Megan.
Thanks.